Hey everybody, welcome to the Grace Community Church Young Mary's YouTube channel. Hope you guys are having a great day. Excited for today's video. We're actually shifting away from parents in the Bible, and we're going to spend a little bit of time focusing on marriages in the Bible, and you know, really just what it looks like. I mean, in the same way that for me at least, when I looked back at the videos we did and through all this study, realizing there were no perfect parents. Even Jesus had parents, that made some mistakes, that maybe did not make the best, wisest parenting decision, but it all worked out. And so I think as we just continue to really try and invest and look into what it means to raise a family in a godly manner and what it means to be godly parents and godly people, I think marriages are certainly something worth looking at. Whether you maybe you aren't married yet and you're looking, hoping someday to be married, I think this will be helpful. If you are married, I really think this will be encouraging because in the previous set of videos, it was really just kind of eye-opening. It was very revelatory of that God uses imperfect people for His will. And so I think we're going to find the same thing. And so this week, like I said, we're going to look into marriages. And so we are going to start off right away with an extremely unique one between Hosea and Gomer. Hosea is a prophet. He is called by God to speak, to give a word from himself to the people. And he has a pretty intense story. He basically, like many of the other prophets, is called to tell them, stop with your idolatry and ultimately stop with your infidelity. And so that's what happens. He is in a very unique situation. There was this time of economic prosperity. There was a war that had happened, and they won that war. They won that battle, and so that led them into this economic prosperity, led them into kind of a civil, kind of civil peace and all of those things. And, what happens sometimes when people get comfortable is that they start to let habits and discipline slip. And so that's what happened to God's people. They then drifted into idolatry. They then essentially became infidelity. They lacked fidelity. They lacked faithfulness. They started to go after foreign gods and other sources of happiness. And God wanted to let them know, hey, that's not okay. That's not what I want for your life. And so he tells Hosea, the prophet, as an analogous lesson, as a way to teach them a story about themselves. He tells Hosea, who's a man of God, I want you to go and marry a prostitute. I want you to go and marry a harlot, marry a sex worker, effectively. And I want her to become your wife. And I want you to commit yourself to her. And so Hosea does this. Hosea, a man of God who, spent his whole life trying to stay within the ceremonial laws so that he would be clean and not impure, is now called by God to go and marry someone who, by all accounts, by all social standards, was not living life correctly. And so Hosea does this. So in Hosea chapter 1, verse 2, he calls Hosea to prophesy against Israel and their unfaithfulness. And to make a point, he says, go and marry Gomer, the prostitute. Marry her, make her your wife, and even start a family with her. And so they have 3 children. The first they have, his name is Jezreel, and they named Jezreel because under Jehu, a massacre had occurred at the place of Jezreel. And so God is using the child of Hosea and Gomer to teach a lesson that, hey, Jezreel, time's up. I've not forgotten the massacre that you committed. I have not forgotten what you did. And ultimately, you're going to pay for it. There is going to be judgment. You are going to experience my wrath. And so they have a child. They name him Jezreel. They then have another child named Lo Ruhamah, and it means not loved, which is a terrible description. Terrible name for a child. We probably should have covered Hosea and Gomer in the parenting series, maybe next time. And basically her name is not loved. And the point of naming her that was that Israel is about to experience a little bit of not living within God's love. Israel is about to experience a little bit of wrath from God. And then finally, Lo-Ami, Loammi, Lo-Ami, which means not my people. And it's just this continuation of Hosea teaching them, God telling Hosea to teach them hey, like you are going to experience, if you don't want to be faithful to me, if you want to follow other gods, if you think these other things are worth pursuing, then you get to live in a time where you're not experiencing being my people. Now, this seems super severe. It seems super unnecessary. It has a kind of a bit of the vibe of Noah and the ark. Like God is so angry, God is so fed up that he's like, I'm done with people. I'm going to get rid of them. I'm going to extinguish them. They are just too much of a hassle. And I agree. When you read it, you're like, man, God is extremely upset. God is very frustrated. God is over it. And I think he is. I mean, there's when you read through Hosea, you see this anguish from God, really, of just how frustrated he is with his people, that he blesses them and then they turn around and they sin. They follow idols. They stop doing the right things and start doing all of the wrong things. And so that is present. But in verse 10, right after he says all these things, and he says, name your kids these things because this is what is how I feel about them and what they're about to go through. He then says, but Israel's descendants are going to be like the sand. Essentially saying like, hey, you guys are still going to be around. You're still going to be my God, or you're still going to be my people. I'm still going to be your God. You are going to follow me. But what you are going through essentially is a time of redemptive punishment. They are entering into the cycle, entering into the phase of, yep, you screwed up. You messed up real bad. There is going to be some consequences you have to pay for it. But in the end, I'm doing this to restore you. I am doing this to teach you about who I am. I want you to recognize that the things you think you want, you don't actually want. And the things you do want is me, is God, is who I am and my ways. And that ultimately is the only thing that's ever going to make you happy. And so that is what they go through. You go down further into chapter 3 and you actually see Gomer goes back to her old ways. Gomer leaves Hosea and goes back to her life of being a harlot, of being a prostitute. She is sleeping with other men. She's going back to her old life, and you can assume she left the kids and leaves her kids, leaves her family, goes back to her old life, and continues the lifestyle that she did. And she ends up getting in a situation where she is essentially enslaved. She's human trafficked. And she's being held as a prisoner with ungodly things probably, really being done to her without her will. And God tells Hosea, I want you to go back and get her. He doesn't say, you know what, she's screwed up, she's cheated on you, you have the right to leave her. He says, go back and get your wife. Go back and get your bride. And Hosea actually has to buy back his wife. It says 15 shekels and some barley loaves and some other things. He has to buy back his wife. He has to buy back something that effectively was already his. He was in a loving relationship with his wife, but because of her own bad decisions, he has to buy her back. And so it is just so extreme. It is just so intense. And ultimately, your marriage and all of marriage, where the people who are following Jesus, marriage is intended to be a picture or an image or an example of the gospel. It is intended to show God's great love for his people, God's great sacrificial act of love through Jesus dying on the cross. It is saying the two people coming together and giving up their lives, giving up their claim on their lives, and living as one. It's intended to demonstrate that. It is intended to be demonstrated through sacrificial love. It is intended to be demonstrated by putting your spouse's needs above your own and really just out-serving one another in the same way that God outserved us. He gave his life for us. But what I think that we tend to not read into enough of is that the love of God demonstrated in significant sacrifice, that there was this substantial sacrifice. And I think we think, well, he died for us because we couldn't do it on our own. Even if we were great and perfect, we couldn't do it on our own, which is true. But the reality is, and the picture of the gospel is, not only could we not do it on our own, we didn't want it. We didn't want God. We were rejecting God. We were trying to live according to our own ways, and God still, in the midst of our infidelity, in the midst of our idolatry, died for us to show us how much he loves us. And so some of us, maybe your sacrifice is you do the dishes or you fold the laundry or you clean the house or whatever your relational sacrifice is. And it's substantial, and I understand that it's difficult, and in a little bit of tongue-in-cheek, but still, there's things that we do sacrifice for our spouse. We put them above us. But when you read the story of Hosea and Gomer and you look at the overall scope, the overall story of the gospel, is that it was not like we were bad people, or kind of bad people, or like not great people that God died for. Like, we were sinners, we were in rebellion, we wanted anything but God. And to prove his love for us and that how much he cares for us and wants a relationship and his ways are better than our ways, he died for us. He died for us when we were cheating on him. He died for us when we wanted anything else but him. And so I think the theme of idolatry and infidelity, it stirs up powerful emotions. When I watch a movie or read a story and there's infidelity, it just makes me so uncomfortable because I just hate the idea of it. And I think it's intended to do that on purpose. We want faithfulness, we want fidelity, we want commitment even in the midst of hard times. And throughout the entire story of Scripture, there are these allusions, these drawing from without explicitly stating what it is, that it's explicitly stated. And the way that Hosea fits with the story of Jesus, the way that Hosea and Jesus have similar paths or have similar storylines, is that infidelity and that idol worship. And that when Jesus died, his people wanted nothing. They were trying to survive in a foreign context. And they had just recognized, hey, God, we don't feel like you're blessing us, and so we're going to try other things. And so it's the same for us, that we are those people. Like, perhaps you may read those or see those and read about Gomer and just be like, she is awful. I'm going to judge her. She's a terrible person. I can't believe she did that. She does not deserve God's love. She deserves whatever suffering and consequences of her own behavior, and certainly she does. But we do too. Like, we are in that camp. Like the wonderful hymn that teaches us, like, prone to wander. Like, we are prone to wander. If we are not careful, if we are not intentional, if we do not, are not disciplined, we will wander away from God. We will wander away from loving our spouse as we are called to. We will wander away from sacrificial love, regardless of what the other person is doing, because of Jesus, because of what Jesus did for us, that we did not deserve his love. We did not do anything to earn it, yet he still gave it to us. And for that, we should be so grateful. That for God's radical pursuit of us, for God's radical just love, just chasing after us in the midst of our own sin and rebellion. And because of Jesus' great love for us, may we be people who lead with grace and radical love. May we demonstrate in all of our relationships this radical love, this radical sacrifice, and especially within our marriage relationships. May we be people who are seen giving up our lives, sacrificing our happiness, our desires, whatever that is, for the other, and in the hopes that if you have two people who are living life sacrificially, trying to outserve each other, giving up their hopes and dreams for the other person, that they will live an incredibly fulfilled life because Jesus has blessed them for it. So, my challenge for you is, let's live radical lives. Let's live radical love and sacrificial love for the other, so that people can see that God is real and that his love for us is significant. Thanks for watching. I hope it is encouraging. As always, share, like, comment, and subscribe. And I pray that you guys are encouraged, and God blesses you this week. And I will talk to you guys soon. Have a good one. Bye.